Hi, I'm Jean Shafiroff, and I'm on a mission. Anyone can be a philanthropist. My television show came from my book, Successful Philanthropy: How to Make a Life by What You Give. Won't you join me? Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. This show is designed to highlight the work of philanthropic leaders here in the United States and beyond. With us today, an important leader with the NAACP. His name, William Moss III. William is the head or president of the NAACP in Islip, New York. Let's all welcome William Moss III. William, thank you so much for joining us. And William, can you tell our viewers a little bit about the NAACP? I know that it was founded in 1909, but I want to hear in your words all about the NAACP.
Sure, and thank you, Gina. The NAACP is one of the oldest civil rights organizations in our country, and it was started not just by people of color, but it was primarily started by people who are not of color. And so we are an all-inclusive organization at our roots and currently, and we promote the advancement of people of color. And how does that look? It looks like fighting for legislation. It looks like creating legislation. It looks like fundraising for educational and social welfare, informational activities. So we do a lot in the community and for the community, and that's what the NAACP is all about.
Yes, and before I speak about or ask you questions about your work, I want our audience to learn a little bit about you because I find you to be a fascinating individual. From what I read, you were born and raised in Brentwood, Long Island, New York, and you went off to Harvard, and you are educated by one of the greatest, or if not the greatest, institution in the United States. In addition, what I read also was that you were a founder or the founder of the NAACP at Harvard. Can you give us a little more information?
Sure, absolutely. I've been an NAACPer since I was 15 years old. I started a program called ACSO, the Afro-Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics, and competed in the area of mathematics both locally and nationwide. And just through that program was thrust into the work and the experience of the NAACP. And so when I ended up at Harvard, I certainly wanted to bring the breadth of civil rights information as well as fight to the Harvard campus. And so I definitely joined with other students to get a variance from the board of directors to be able to even start a chapter at Harvard, which was an amazing feat back in the 1990s.
And what year was that exactly?
I believe it was 1999. It was right after I graduated with my bachelor's and was in the master's program at the School of Education.
Yes, and so today you are a volunteer president, is that correct?
That's correct. The NAACP branch administration, so to speak, or all of the officers and the members are volunteers. And so the work that you see or anyone sees being done in local communities is being done by volunteers.
Yes, and in your work life, I understand you work in education. Tell us a little bit about your job, and then how important is education for our future children?
Sure. I work in the Lawrence School District. I'm the Director of Academic Affairs at Lawrence High School. There I supervise mathematics, science, English as a new language, bilingual education, and world languages. And so I found basically like the dream job for me because I'm a big advocate of multiculturalism, and I get to express that through being a supervisor of world languages. And then I'm a math and science nerd down deep in my heart. So being supervisor of both those departments is a dream come true for me.
And that's Lawrence, Long Island, correct?
Lawrence, New York, yeah.
Yes, and then do you live, and then you're involved in Islip, so I assume you are a Suffolk County resident. And
Sure, yeah, I'm born and raised in Brentwood. I still live in Brentwood, and bought my house, my hometown. I taught in Brentwood mathematics for 11 years before moving into a supervisory role in Lawrence School District. And so I'm a teacher as well as an administrator. Now I teach adults too now, so as a supervisor, so it's kind of, education is the type of field that, you get to always be an instructor, you get to always be a instructional leader and teacher, no matter what field no matter what position you're in. So it's a great field that way.
Yes, and education is the door to many opportunities for just about everyone. That's what I believe. I grew up in Hicksville, Long Island, and my father was a school teacher, a music teacher, and he was very interested in the education of his students. He was a great role model, and he's not with us any longer, but education was something that was very important in my household, and I saw how it opened up many, many doors. Now, getting back to the NAACP, and something that is not an easy question to ask, but are there many race problems on Long Island?
Sure. It's not an easy question to answer, but my automatic answer is yes, there are some, race relation issues on Long Island. In particular, I think that government still has a long way to go in terms of being truly diverse and representative of the people that they serve. What does that look like? There are very low percentages of minorities working in fields in government. And so, especially in the suburbs of New York, which Long Island is a suburb in the state of New York, we still go through, a lack of diversity in a lot of fields. And so there's still much room for improvement in the area of diversifying the workforce, especially in government.
Yes. So what about jobs? Are there enough job opportunities for people of color?
Well, the opportunities are there. It's just that there are still, mechanisms in place that we've inherited from the 1960s, really, that were designed to keep institutions predominantly white and still do keep institutions predominantly white. And a lot of these, policies and procedures that are sometimes on the books and sometimes just the way we do things, right? Keep people of color out and reduce opportunities for people of color. One of the ones that, I believe really does do that is when there's a hiring from within. As a mathematician, I know what that means. So in 1968, when civil rights laws passed, all of a sudden people wanted to hire from within. Well, if you hire from within when an institution is 99.9% white, then that lengthens the time that it would take for that institution to become diverse because you're constantly hiring from within. That is like a mathematical phenomenon, right? And it sounds great that we have these promotional civil service rules on the books, or when institutions say, we're going to hire our own or hire from within. But what it actually physically does is block highly qualified minorities from the outside or from outside the institution who, if they were given the opportunity to compete, would probably get the job. It blocks those people from being able to compete for the positions. And so that's where that's the kind of work that the NAACP does. It's almost like being a private investigator. You kind of have to go and look for things that are invisible through the complaint process, through the statistics, and find these issues that are occurring.
No question. Jobs have to be available to everybody, and no one should be judged on the color of their skin or their gender. And as someone very active with women's rights, I see that women are often discriminated against as well. And none of this is right. And racial inequality does exist in this country. And that's why organizations like the NAACP must exist and they must continue to work. And William, it's so good to have you on this show and to hear firsthand about some of the work that you're doing. And so getting back to the NAACP, give us a little bit more of exactly, I read about they have a 6-step approach. Can you describe what those 6 steps are? And if you can't, what are the main objectives? You can go over this again. I know I asked you before, but I think for our viewers, it's very important that they really understand the value and the importance of what the NAACP does.
Sure, absolutely. We have 6 game changers. I think that's what you're talking about, the 6-step
Yes.
approach. And so, yeah, it's meant to be a comprehensive approach to helping advance people of color in the United States. And really, I have to be honest with you, when people of color, especially African Americans, are uplifted, the entire country is uplifted. And so those comprehensive areas, education is one, voting and representation is another, and elections, youth is another, economic development. When we push for all those issues and advancement in communities of color, it really does create a quality of excellence across the board. And so it really does work out to be good for everyone when issues of fairness and access are addressed. In particular, the African American community appears to be the most suppressed in those areas. And so we advocate for those oppressive forces to be released. But overall, when they are released, they help everyone. And so that's why I love the work that I do, because at the end of the day, it's not just helping African Americans. It really is clearing the air and making a way for everyone to be able to reach the American dream.
And I couldn't agree more. I believe that we all must be treated equally, regardless of our gender or the color of our skin. And this is why groups like the NAACP are so important. Now, to our audience, we are with William Moss III. He is the president of the NAACP in Islip, New York. He is a Harvard-educated man. He works in education, and he has been in his his elected position at the NAACP in Islip for the last 7 years. He's now in his 4th term. And now getting back to the history of our country, I always say it was a pretty horrific beginning with slavery. And unfortunately, the damage that slavery caused to our country it's taken a long time, and the problem still exists because during slavery, families were separated. And as all of us know, the family unit is the key, a loving environment where there is a parent involved or 2 parents involved, and then someone who serves as a good role model, a mother, and then a father, or one senior person, maybe a grandmother or an aunt. This is very important. And does the NAACP discuss the importance of family or anything like that in what they do?
Sure. We've actually, in the Islip Town Branch, we've held sessions with folks, like panel discussions with marriages that have, long marriages, like 25-year marriages, 30-year marriages, or even sometimes we talk about 15-year marriages and we say, well, how did you do it? We do have those kind of conversations, because the experience of raising a family in a Black family in the United States is challenging. And so when people do find success, we try to share those the methods to success that help our young people who do face challenges based on the color of their skin. How did we help them to not internalize it and not become what people say that you should be and to become something else. Um, that has to be part of our family upbringing and existence, certainly was part of mine. My father and mother were very vocal about what I would have to do to be successful. And I put that to action pretty well, I think. And so having those conversations about what African Americans or people who are darker skinned have to do to not just survive, but live well is what we discuss in the NAACP, and that's for all people's consumption. We don't block anyone from being a member of the NAACP or for running for an executive or office in the NAACP. Anybody can join. My education director is a beautiful white woman who is hardworking, and I just want to pivot and say that her name is Marie, and she's doing a phenomenal job promoting a piece of legislation that we developed called the HOPE Act. It stands for Hiring Outstanding Professionals in Education, and we are pushing for a New York State education law addition that will meet a need and cause districts to have to hire in a certain way. Right now, New York State education law is completely silent on public school teacher and administrator hiring. In other words, the secretary, head custodian in every public school in New York has to take a civil service test just to get the job. And there are rules to how that person is hired. In New York, there are no rules to how the teacher or the administrator in that building are hired. So we are putting forward a law that just lays out that the position must be posted and that individuals must be in a competitive process. The position just can't be given away. That the records of that competitive process have to be held for a minimum of 7 years by the district to keep everybody honest and to give people a fair shot. Our finding is that when fairness in teacher hiring is promoted and existent, then African Americans and other people of color have a fair chance and do get hired. When there is no fairness, African Americans do not get hired. And that's our finding.
Yes, well, fairness in hiring, no question, is very important. And African Americans should have the same opportunity as white people, and people of color should have the same opportunity. Now, I just want to go back. I was mentioning the importance of the family unit, and today we have many marriages, same-sex marriages, and I just, regardless of whether it's a two-parent head of household, man and wife, or man and man, or wife and wife, or a single head of household, it's all good and it's all very nice for the children just to have someone at the helm of the family, or a relative as well, or somebody there to help with the children, because we have a situation in our country right now with the foster children where they're having a very rough time. And I think we need to focus on foster children. Now, we are living in the middle of a pandemic right now, the COVID-19 pandemic. And William, how has the Black community on Long Island been affected? And do you think they've been affected more than other groups? Or in my estimation, we're all affected about the same. And I think I'm on the board of a hospital, our hospital, Stony Brook Southampton Hospital. We treat everyone the same, regardless of background, including even if they don't have insurance. We never let anyone leave without treatment if they need treatment. And but how has this pandemic affected the Black community?
Sure. I think it's highlighted a couple of things. I think it's highlighted some of our pre-existing health issues in the community, for sure. The statistics do show that we are passing away from COVID-19 or complications of COVID-19 at a higher rate than every other race in the United States. And so, that bears the question of why And so we're looking at pre-existing conditions in our community and our general health as being one of those reasons as to why. But also now that we're kind of on the other side with the vaccine and some treatments that are available for COVID-19 infection, we're also looking at, okay, what kind of access do African Americans have to getting, the good treatment? You know what I mean? Like Trump treatment. What kind of access do we have to that? And that's lesser, probably not because of direct animosity for African Americans, but certainly because of the lack of social connections that some folks have that we don't have. And that's part of the issue of survival once we are infected, is what kind of access do we have to the therapies that could have saved our lives. And I think that's the real and current question for us as African Americans in this present hour.
Well, everyone should be treated the same and fairly, regardless of their background, for sure. And now, going back to the NAACP, if someone wants to donate or get involved as a volunteer, how do we go about doing that?
Sure. I do have a website for the NAACP in my town, which is islipnaacp.org. We also have a state website, nysnaacp.org. Anyone in New York State can get involved in that way and find your branch or local branch on that website. And just reach out to them, give them a call or send them an email, and people are pretty responsive. For Islip Town, we welcome everybody. We're very aggressive in terms of progress and wanting to move the needle. We actually, this Sunday, we are having a person from the LGBTQ plus community as our keynote speaker. Yancey Ford, who was an Emmy Award-winning producer and is transgender, is going to be speaking at our online event, fundraising event. And this is a very rare occurrence for the NAACP to have an openly LGBTQ plus person speaking at one of our events. Islip Town is very progressive in that way. We welcome everyone, and we know that in this day and age, we have to move the needle forward. We have to talk about some of the tougher issues, especially in communities of color, and certainly LGBTQ plus issues are one of them. So we're happy to have him and him being able to talk about his journey. And he's also a native son of Central Islip. So he's, born and bred amongst us. So we're delighted to have him back. So we're really progressive with Islip Town NAACP and all inclusive, and really push for civil rights for everyone.
Yes, and I think it's very important that you have guest speakers like the one you've just mentioned, and particularly the transgender population in the United States is having a very difficult time now, and especially the children. And I think any kind of support that we can give to the LGBTQ community is very important. And I like that the NAACP is looking to the LGBTQ community for help and also for education. And now getting back to Islip and education, as a leader in your community, what advice, we have just a few minutes left, do you want to give to young people?
The same advice I will give to old people. Be present. Be present, be present, be present. You can't make a change by yelling at your cell phone or at the computer screen or at the television. You have to get involved. You have to be educated and understand what's going on so that you can be there to make a difference. When everybody closes their eyes and puts their head in the sand, that's what allows bad things to happen. If we are all eyes open and we're all vigilant in watching what happens in our local communities, then quality improves. And so I would tell young people what I tell older folks: you must be involved. You're a citizen of the United States. You must be involved.
And I assume the NAACP has mentoring opportunities, meaning positions for people who want to serve as mentors to younger people.
We sure do. The program I was mentioning to you earlier, the Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics, has categories from, like I said, in math to science, poetry, chemistry, violin, like classical playing, opera singing. You know, there's every different category is there. So if you are an adult and you want to mentor teenagers in those areas, the NAACP has a program for you.
And that's truly wonderful. And again, the website for donations to the NAACP, if you could just repeat that to our viewers.
Sure, absolutely. It's www.islipnaacp.org, and everything is there.
And just on thank you. And on a personal note, are you positive about the future, about 2021? And I guess this pandemic is ending. And I'd like to hear a little bit from you, though.
Sure. I'm hopeful. I think that we have a new direction in our country. I think that we'll have more inclusivity than exclusivity. And my hope and prayer is that people really listen to each other. There's an opportunity now for folks to really hear one another. And I hope that that is what happens, and that hearts and minds will change for the better.
Those are good words. And thank you very much, William, for being on this show. Today, our guest was William Moss III. He is the president of the NAACP's Islip Division on Long Island. He does a lot of good work. He's been at his position for over 7 years. I want to thank him again for all the good work he's doing. I'm Jean Shafiroff, your host, and I'll see you next week.